Good afternoon. I call this hearing to order. Earlier this year, the subcommittee launched an investigation to examine cultural and systemic problems regarding abuse in the Olympic movement. This subcommittee, which exercises jurisdiction over the U.S. Olympic Committee and amateur sports, is fully committed to ensuring the health and safety of all American athletes, and today marks the second hearing in our ongoing investigation. We began this process in January following the disgusting revelations that former USA Gymnastics team doctor Larry Nassar sexually abused hundreds of athletes over the span of 2 decades, even well after numerous survivors alerted authorities about his actions. As we now know, many of our American Olympians who stood tall in representing our nation in the international stage were suffering behind the scenes. Their stories break our hearts, and all of the athletes who have come forward to share them are to be commended for their courage. I know I speak for me and Senator Blumenthal when I express our thanks to the many survivors who have personally met with us throughout this investigation. We are grateful to have 4 abuse survivors across different Olympic sports join our subcommittee hearing panel in April to share their experiences and recommendations on what Congress ought to do to make certain athletes are protected from predators. We are joined by several surviving athletes today, and I thank them for their continued interest and courage demonstrated throughout this investigation. Today's hearing marks the next step in our investigation in order to make recommendations that will be effective and meaningful in driving change in the Olympic movement so that athletes will be able to freely participate in their sports without fear of abuse. It is important that we understand how this happened. Who knew about the abuse? When did they know? What did they do with that information? And importantly, why? To that end, this subcommittee has sought extensive documentation from the U.S. Olympic Committee, USA Gymnastics, and Michigan State University, organizations represented on today's panel. We have requested and received additional documentation from all national governing bodies on their policies and procedures, reporting, handling, and combating abuse, as well as their use of athlete organizations' non-disclosure agreements. Unfortunately, for 4 years removed from the first Michigan State investigation into Nassar allegations, and 3 years after a USA Gymnastics coach first heard of the abuse, there are a multitude of questions that remain unanswered. My hope and desire is that the witnesses here today can help answer these outstanding questions, provide us with their perspective on what went wrong, and offer their advice on how it can be prevented from ever happening again. Joining us today is Steve Penny, the former president of USA Gymnastics, Rhonda Faehn, USA Gymnastics former senior vice president and women's program director, and Dr. Luanna Simon, the former president of Michigan State University. 2 additional witnesses were invited to participate today, but were unable to travel to Washington for medical reasons. Scott Blackmun, the former president of the U.S. Olympic Committee, and Marta Karolyi, the former national team coordinator for USA Gymnastics. Mr. Blackmun and Ms. Karolyi have each provided written testimony for today's hearing and will respond to committee members' written questions for the hearing record. We are also honored today to welcome Senators Joni Ernst of Iowa and Jeanine Shaheen of New Hampshire to the subcommittee to provide opening testimony. Senators Ernst and Shaheen have taken a sincere interest in preventing abuse in the Olympic movement, and their testimony today will be invaluable in helping this subcommittee further raise awareness and identify solutions that will make a difference. Thank you both for your time that you've taken to prepare and for your presence here this afternoon, and most importantly, for your care and concern for athletes today. I will conclude my remarks by reminding my colleagues that in light of Mr. Penny and Dr. Simon declining the committee's invitation to appear voluntarily, subpoenas were issued requiring their attendance today. Through their counsels, both Mr. Penny and Dr. Simon have made clear that they would not appear voluntarily on June the 5th or any other date going forward. I wish that were not the case, as issuing subpoenas is something this committee takes very seriously and only pursues as a last resort. Despite the circumstances, however, I appreciate their presence today, and I look forward to a productive hearing on this important matter. With that, I will turn to the ranking member, Senator Blumenthal, for his opening statement.